So namaste, welcome to this monthly Satsang Q&A session. And we are here for volume 11 this month for September. And we go through as many questions as possible that have been sent in during the previous months. And we do have a little queue of questions, working through them as fast as we can. So please be patient if you've sent one in, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. If you would like to ask a question, the link and the link on our website to go to submit a question will be in the description below this video when it's uploaded to YouTube. And you can ask a question on there. If you questions are read out here anonymously. So if you would like to ask a question anonymously, or if you just simply can't make it to a live satsang because you're working or you're in a different time zone, you're more than welcome to send in a question. And you're always, of course, welcome to join our community as well. There will be a link as well in the description. It's a community of like-minded beings studying these teachings. And as always, we are very loving, open family, and we're all heading in the same direction. We're all looking for this deep and rich and full embodiment of our awakening. So check that out as well if you are looking for some community. And it's just always easier when we walk this path together. So we'll make a start on the questions for today. I have, as usual, Anish here with me to read the questions for me. So thank you so much, Anish. And whenever you're ready, we'll get started.
First question. Gratitude, Helen, for crossing my path. You're a beacon of love in this incarnation. Gratitude. My question is that all my life I have bitten my nails. I know that behind it is fear, insecurity, and anxiety when I have to make decisions for myself because I have always had relationships that were very dependent on them, on parents, on partners. In order to look at this, I think I have to contemplate a question about my beliefs and my doubts. I don't know if it is I'm not good enough or I'm not safe or secure. I see them very similar. Please, could you help me with a question so I can finally transcend the belief that reflects this nail habit? A hug of light.
Thank you. And yes, you remind me of my own previous, it's not an issue now, but when there was a lot of fear in the system, that was one of the things that would happen for me. And sometimes I got to the point where it's very, very painful. So when it comes to contemplation and choosing the question, it's not really something that I could tell you what to begin to ask. It's more important that you sit with the emotion, and you've mentioned fear here. And so you've suggested two questions here that feel very, very similar. I would suggest feeling that fear the best that you can and really looking at what the fear wants to tell you. So rather than choosing a question, let the fear choose a question so that the question is coming organically from the belief rather than the mind trying to think about something. The mind can't get in touch with the emotion because it's not sentient in that way, the mind. So you're going to feel the emotion, feel the fear the best that you can, and ask it what it wants to tell you from there. And that will be the real belief to work with and turn into a question, as you pointed to. It may be one of these two that you've suggested. It also may not be. It may be quite surprising when you look. So just sitting with that and seeing, taking a few moments, a few minutes. And if the belief doesn't come straight away, it's normal. Just give it some time. And you can even go about your day and maybe you have an epiphany. This is the right question. And just see what happens with that. So hope that helps. Thanks, Anish.
Next question. I am in recovery from substance abuse, but I'm struggling to stop my pain medication. I have been feeling joy and understanding from non-dual teachings, but wonder if this medicine will impede my full awakening. I have longer and longer periods of silence, but there is often a feeling of disassociation along with this. I am disassociative by nature, it seems, anyway. Thank you.
So, no substance can affect our awakening, whether that's alcohol, for example, or caffeine, sugar, any kind of medication. They have an effect upon the body, of course, but that which you are is recognizing itself, um, not through and as the body. The body provides contrast only. So the body provides a sense of being somewhere and a sense of growing and changing and becoming, being born, living a life and dying. But it's actually the formless consciousness that's recognizing itself by itself, as itself. Consciousness, seeing itself to be consciousness that is already independent of the body. Consciousness is using a body to express itself through, but it doesn't need that body to recognize itself, only for contrast. So, all of this is to say that if we believe that something can affect our awakening, anything at all, it could be lack of sleep, right, or anything, then we're going to experience that as being true. Because we have the infinite power, actually, the consciousness is infinite power. So all this power is being funneled through this idea that something is slowing my awakening down or can slow my awakening down. So when and where to give up medication, that's not my purview to discuss. And of course, you know that. And maybe, that's something you can speak about if you are in a 12-step recovery group, is something you can look at, maybe also with your physicians as well. But from a spiritual perspective, there is nothing that can get in the way of your awakening. There is nothing more powerful than the infinite consciousness. And there is only infinite consciousness. Also, this consciousness can show up as medication and mental fog or whatever is going on. And you might just want to check out, are you disassociating or are you just naturally feeling more detachment from everyday life? I don't know. Most likely, I'd say the latter, if you are feeling a lot more silence and peace, as you suggested here. They may look similar at first. Usually, naturally, there's detachment from the emotions that are going on and the thoughts more and more because our identity is switching over to knowing that we are the consciousness already, that we never were that separate person with all of its stories and all of its troubles. So, just something to ponder there. Sounds to me like you're on track and just letting go of this idea that something can slow you down here. It's a very commonly held belief. What can stop or affect you, the infinite consciousness, from recognizing yourself? Nothing at all. So it's good to let go of these ideas. Thank you, Anish.
Next question. Amazingly, I have suddenly begun to experience true awareness. It's just a glimpse for now. What I notice is the radical neutrality, to borrow another's expression, of awareness, unbothered, free of judgment, supremely equanimous. I have not felt love, however, in all of this. So many speak of love when talking about awareness or consciousness or the true self. I don't feel that, just detachment and observation. Can you expand on what is love in true awareness? Thank you.
Yeah, it's very, very normal. And it was the same for me. At first, all I felt was relief, actually. relief that I couldn't suffer when I noticed awareness. And then it kind of developed into some sense of detachment, contentment. Um, so even when there was stuff going on for the body mind, still I was kind of content within myself as awareness. That's how it felt in the body. So contentment and fear, for example. And it developed then into a much deeper peace over time as my identity continued to shift towards the recognition I've always been this awareness, never been a person. And then from deep peace into a sense of joy. First, just a little lightheartedness and then a deep joy, um, to the point where sometimes, there's a lot of laughter, a lot of joy, a lot of fun, spontaneity. And then even deeper than that, love, a deep sense of love began to emerge for myself, this body mind, and all body minds. Not a gushing outer expression of love necessarily, but a deep sense of everyone is just doing the best that they can and struggling with their own challenges, their own beliefs, and all of that. Later, still developed into deep, deep bliss, and sometimes even a sense of ecstasy. It begins to arise. So, what's the difference between this initial relief and this where it is now? It's simply only the amount of life force that's been freed up in the body. As we let go of believing thoughts about ourselves, the big one, of course, is that we are a separate person. It takes so much life force to sustain that and because it's the very opposite of what's true. We think we are this tiny thing. Really, we're something so very different. So as we work with recognizing who we are and letting go of the old ideas of who we're not, then the life force becomes freed up in the body. And you could say really that shame and fear and apathy are really just the body saying, you're using a whole lot of life force here to sustain these ideas. And contentment and relief is, you've let go. There's a lot more free life force than there used to be. And then love and bliss and all of that are when we have really let go of perhaps a lot of thoughts. Awareness didn't seem like love at all to me. At first, it seemed just blank or detached or neutral, as you pointed to here. But that was enough for me at first. That was an island I was willing to stand on in an ocean of suffering, right? Relief even was enough for me to start off with. But this urge to find out what love is awareness wanting to reveal itself to you even more clearly. Awareness is equally aware of any phenomena at all. It doesn't have the capacity to reject anything. It doesn't have the capacity to judge. This thought is a nice one, I'll keep it. This one I don't like. Only the mind does that. It doesn't have any thoughts at all about the mind except for how beautiful the mind is. It's another creation it made. In fact, awareness sees everything as itself. It sees only itself wherever it looks. So you might want to sit with that question, what really is awareness, and just allow it to open up into these deeper and deeper seeings. It's normal at first when there's just a few glimpses. You might not feel that love at first because still a lot of life force might be tied up in some beliefs that we're not good enough, for example, or that we're not safe. Areas of our life where we're still living as a separate being, an imaginary separate being. So it's very, very normal. But just that curiosity, it's love calling itself, awareness saying, look, I can be love as well. I want to know what love is. That was a beautiful question for me when I embraced it. What is love? I found awareness to be the same as love, just another name, because if it isn't that in which all phenomena are allowed to equally arise, exist for as long as they want to, and then fall away, with absolutely no capacity to reject or try to change that phenomena, isn't that love, really? Later, it may come as a feeling, but first, it comes as a kind of knowing. So, all of this is to say you're right on track with this. Keep going and get really curious about what awareness is. If there's one piece of advice I would say, it's never assume that you know what awareness is. I can't assume now that I know what awareness is, what I am. Every day it deepens in the way it feels to live this in the body. Every day better than the previous. This is what's happening for you. It starts off slowly at first, but then begins to climb upwards. Thanks, Anish.
I'm wondering if there is a way to get off this path once it's started. I have been following these teachings and engaging in the non-dual practices for almost 20 years without any sort of glimpse or shift, and I'm really done with it. I've lost my interest, but my mind is still obsessed with the teachings. I'm not looking for another technique. I just want to know how to stop my mind from obsessing so I can move on with my life. It's hurting my mental health.
First of all, let me say I really want to send you lots of love. I remember feeling this way so many times. And secondly, of course, if you need some help with your mental health, please do get it. We don't need to be battling on many fronts here. And having been there myself with very poor mental health, yeah, please do get help if you need it. But I also want to say that it sounds like that the seeking has stopped for you, that the drive and the urge and the impulse has stopped. This desperate need to get away from suffering has fallen away. And all that needs to happen now is, as you say, a glimpse. And a glimpse and a seeing of who you really are. First of all, I'd really encourage you to dive into self-inquiry playlist. I know that you said that you just want to exit the path. But some radical, honest truth here is that you are the path. I tried to leave the path so many times because I was so disenchanted. And each time I found myself back on it, and I realized that the separate being that wanted to quit was the illusion. And without that idea, there was peace. So rather than questioning how to quit the path, I would question who it is that wants to quit. And I don't mean you have to dive into deep self-inquiry if you don't feel that urge. I totally understand that. But asking this question, who is it that really wants to quit? Can we just doubt that one a little bit? That identity that wants to, I've been seeking for 20 years. I understand completely. 25 years for me. Well, 24 years of seeking and not finding, and a year of really, really, really finding. When I began to do what I'm saying here, which was to doubt this one that's been on the journey. What if that's not at all who you are? At all. And as much as we might want to quit the path, really it's truth calling truth to itself. It's awareness calling to itself to recognize itself as awareness. There is no one that could quit that path. That may not be what you want to hear. It wasn't what I wanted to hear either. But it did give me a nudge inside to begin to doubt this one that was traveling and not getting anywhere, not achieving it, not seeing it, not becoming it, all of these subtle identities I still had for myself. Who are you without this story that you've been seeking for 20 years? Who are you without that story? Are you willing to give that one up? Also, if you do, there'll be peace even if you don't recognize fully who you are. So this may not be the answer that you want, but it's the only answer I can really give. I have to say what's true, and there isn't a person that could quit. I tried. I really, really tried so many times. I was done. I was so apathetic, disenchanted. But somehow, some way, I always found myself back watching a satsang again or something, reading a scripture. Why? Because truth is really the one that's looking for itself. There's no one to achieve it anyway, no person. You are already infinite awareness. And you might be much further along than you actually realize if most of the seeking has fallen away. So have a ponder with that and see if you like anything in what I've said. If there's nothing here I've said that you'd like, so be it. That's totally okay. But my job is to tell the truth, and I have done that. Again, sending lots of love because it also sucks completely. Thanks, Anish.
Thank you, Helen, for making the non-dual teachings available and accessible to us. Is it consistent with the non-dual perspective when you say that all tradition, rituals, and habits, mementos, etc., are simply expressions of the separate self or ego to perpetuate itself? And so, as we live increasingly in the now, we will naturally dispense with these things, or do they serve other purposes that are consistent with the teaching, with gratitude?
So, yes and no is the answer I want to give. So, if we take, for example, the Buddha that's sitting behind me here, um, for the longest time, I thought that I was wanting to emulate um, a man who lived in India a very long time ago, that we know as the Buddha. I thought that's what this represented. And I went through a phase later of realizing that there is only, not a phase, but a deep recognition, there is only formlessness. And all forms are expressions of this formlessness. So eventually, whether we're looking at a form, a representation, or the experience of the formlessness itself, at the end of the path, it's exactly the same. You look at the Buddha sitting here, and it points you to the infinite formlessness, the Buddha nature, the true being that we are. So it doesn't really matter either way. And paradoxically, you might find yourself surrounded with more mementos, and you might have a nice altar in your place where you meditate or something like that. Just as a way to have something to look at that represents to you, and that it's the true pointing of any statue or um, representation of any name of the divine, Shiva, Krishna, Buddha, Christ, all of those, and many, many more. It's only a reminder to point you back to the formlessness anyway. So you might find you end up with more of them, not less. Or maybe you'll get rid of them all, knowing they're not needed. But either way, it's totally, totally the same inside. They don't point to a form anyway. They are a form pointing to the formlessness that they represent, as you said. Thanks, Anish.
Dear Helen, thank you for everything you bring to the world. I have been doing your Dissolving the Ego course and engaging in satsang and self inquiry. Things intensified, more limiting thoughts coming up to the surface to clear. I'm a bit perplexed. In the light of seeing, the body went into self distracting mechanisms of smoking and drinking alcohol, as if it cannot take in the light. It's blocking it. And I don't seem to be able to stop it. Please, could you offer some insight on this? Thank you.
What if nothing is actually going wrong here? What if your body and it's the things that it's doing are actually your body's way of saying, now that we're seeing the light of our real nature, have a look at this too. How about we bring this into the light? Something that we wanted to go away. I know myself with alcohol, in previous years, it was something that I would judge myself for, feel guilty about, and all of that. When it started to happen again after a deeper seeing, I jumped to this conclusion that almost everyone does, that there's something going wrong here. But eventually I saw that it's actually coming up so that I can have an opportunity to choose non-judgment, to choose loving self-acceptance, rather than to push this away. Of course, you want the behavior to be different. You'd rather the body wasn't doing these things. Of course, it's okay to want something different, but it's never going to come about by judging ourselves. So, in my awakening, as it deepened after seeing of who I really am, life paraded in front of me all the things I was still judging myself for. Carrying a few too many pounds in weight, not having enough money, relationships that weren't working, drinking alcohol, as we've said here. I could go on, being in debt, many things. And one by one, I had to really let go of judging myself because that's where I was sustaining a sense of separation. So, how do you feel when it's happening? Can you notice the thoughts and feelings when the body does these things? It's usually some kind of rejection, isn't it? Why is this happening? Should have stopped by now. Things are getting worse instead of better. And I would really urge you to take a look at the contemplation playlist here on YouTube on the channel. There's a whole bunch of videos about how to work with things like this consciously to really reveal what it's trying to show us and to move beyond it. But it always comes down to self-love. No problem that is a reflection of self-judgment is fixed by self-judgment. If more judgment of ourselves worked, these things wouldn't happen. They'd be gone by now. Maybe the body's saying, hey, please bring this into the light of your loving acceptance and see what happens then. Okay, it's going on. I'd rather it didn't, but I'm not going to use it as a reason to reject myself. And I'm not going to say anymore that something's going wrong here. This is finally able to be seen in the light of who we really are. And we can choose something different consciously without rejecting what is, without rejecting ourselves. So I hope that helps. Love is always the answer. Always. Thanks, Anish.
Hi, Helen. Thank you in anticipation of a clear and helpful response. I've heard the question asked and answered a number of times regarding whether our awareness is continuous and uninterrupted, especially in deep sleep. I can understand that our consciousness remains while we are dreaming. But the fact that after we wake up, we know we have slept well does not to me prove that we have remained aware in deep sleep. We can experience the effects of having slept well after the event, and that alone seems adequate to explain that we've slept well. Some people require a great deal of shaking and calling to wake them up, even if there is a loud alarm ringing or an emergency happening very nearby. If their consciousness was continuous, surely this would not have been the case. I have great respect for you and your teaching, Helen. Still, nothing I heard so far from any non dual teacher has satisfactorily explained the question as to whether our consciousness remains and is uninterrupted during sleep, dreamless sleep. Can you please help with this? Sincere thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you might want to check out some of these earlier Q&A sessions. I think this comes up quite often as a question. Um, but the way to prove, we want to prove experientially. You want to be able to prove to yourself experientially that consciousness doesn't go away. And that is the most important thing right now. So If consciousness could be interrupted, if it goes away during deep sleep, for example, then we would know, we would be able to check out right now the consciousness that we are and see if it can come to an end. We can prove now in the waking state, beyond all doubt, that consciousness cannot stop and start, come and go. Then we will know that consciousness is continuous throughout waking, dream, and deep sleep. And we'll begin to actually experience that. Right now, we can't experience that consciousness is continuous during deep sleep because we believe it might be able to stop and start. Whatever we believe, we experience. So let's take a look right now. What is conscious of these words? What is it that's conscious of your body? Notice the contact that your body's making with the chair that you're sitting on. And notice what is conscious or aware of that. What is it that knows? This, if you've seen this before, the formless consciousness, if you've directly experienced it, this may be a little quicker. You don't have to spend so much time on this. If you haven't, there are lots of self-inquiry videos here on the channel that will help you with it. When we look at what's conscious or aware of the body, for example, we find that there's something without any form at all that is aware of any form. More attention on what is conscious than what we're conscious of. More attention on the consciousness than the thoughts that we're conscious of. And we look for what consciousness is. We find nothing tangible at all. It's not an object. And again, if you need help with confirming that, because that's the first thing to confirm, we need to find out whether consciousness is an object or not an object. If it's an object, it has the same qualities as all other objects. If like a thought or a table or a tree, it has a beginning where it starts, and it has a duration, a lifespan, like the body, and then an end point where it disappears. So only objects can stop and start. That which is not an object, the formless consciousness, is not able to be interrupted. We can also ask about this moment now, this moment that we're experiencing as you listen to this answer. Now, the now moment, just another word for consciousness or awareness. When does this moment stop? Even if I'm still talking and the body starts moving around, has this moment stopped? On a clock, it looks like lots of little moments. But has anything broken or interrupted this moment? Can it? How long has this moment been going on for? Can consciousness, this moment, awareness, silence, whatever you want to call it, can it stop? Did it start? And that's what we want to really prove experientially. So I sat with this question for 30 days myself, each day asking this question for 5 or 10 minutes, became pretty much obsessed with it for a while, until I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that nothing can interrupt consciousness. And then I began to become aware of the body sleeping, and I was still awake, still conscious. Little by little, it started to happen. But you want to prove to yourself, first of all, find out if consciousness is an object or not an object. If it's not an object, it cannot be given any of the qualities of an object. It does not have a beginning or an end. It does not come and go. It cannot be broken and interrupted. This moment, can you pick this moment in two? Can you slice it down the middle, cut it with scissors, and make it stop here and start there? Can you do that with something that is completely intangible? something to really investigate. And I urge you to really get curious and even maybe a little obsessed with this question. Just because during the nighttime, consciousness is not really so interested in playing with the senses. It plays with the mind a little bit in the dream state, but it's really not that interested in looking through the senses for 8 hours a day, 16 hours a day, whatever. It looks through the senses. The other 8 hours, it's like, I'm done with that. I don't even want a sense of duality. I'm just going to rest in my completely whole, unitive, formless essence. And so, even if we don't experience or know that consciousness is present during deep sleep, it is. But answer isn't going to help unless you prove it to yourself. That's what satsang is all about. That's what this teaching is all about. Finding out for yourself. Don't take anyone's word for it. Make sure it's a knowing inside. Find out if consciousness is an object. Find out if it comes and goes, if it can be interrupted. You prove that to yourself, you'll know there is nothing that can change or alter consciousness. It cannot come to an end. Only that which is conscious of, the body, thoughts, emotions, deep sleep even, will come to an end and has a beginning, but not for consciousness. Have fun with it. Thanks, Anish.
Next question. Thank you for reading my message, and God bless you all for the help that you are giving to humanity. What would you say to a woman who has had her only child die and who suddenly doesn't care about anything anymore, with her heart broken and her body broken as a whole, with her soul broken and forced to survive?
Um, First of all, let me thank you for your honesty and your candor. Um, as a mother myself, I can't really begin to imagine. I've had to face the possibility of losing a child a few times. I've never actually lost a child. And, people say, would you even be upset by that if you were fully awakened? And for me, the deepest place that our awakening can touch us is the full um, experiencing of the totality of what it means to be a human being, embracing all of it, the highs, the lows, the absolutely awful, tragic, the beautiful, amazing, and everything in between. So, if I can give you any advice, um, it would simply be that judging yourself for what you're feeling or rejecting your feelings, I'm sure you're not doing that, but just in case, it's something that you can let go of. I don't know how I would be if this happened to me. I don't know. I really don't know. I had to go through those emotions when it looked like I might lose a child. And it turned out not to be so, but it certainly showed me something about what it means to be authentic as awakening deepens. I had this idea that authenticity would be um, only feeling good all the time, and it really wasn't. It was being authentically present to whatever was being felt. And what I would say is that if you have any community around you, spiritual community, to reach out for help to those beings in the community. There is a community here in these teachings. If you feel inclined, there's a lot of love and support there. You can find a link in the video to join the community. It's okay to feel how you feel. I'd also recommend, though, if you do need some extra help, there are many times on my path that counseling or therapy, as it's perhaps called elsewhere, was very helpful. It doesn't have to be that awakening on a non-dual path excludes that. In fact, it can really help us. Sometimes we need it. Sometimes we need that support. And the last thing I want to say is that right now, although you may not be able to feel it, you are surrounded by so many beings that are trying to help you. Most of them are invisible and intangible. They're in their subtle forms. And if it feels right to you, perhaps just a simple help me as an honest prayer will begin to allow that help to come in. Sometimes in our grief, we become closed to help that is available to us. And maybe we don't even want that help at that time. That's okay if you don't want to do that. Prayer got me through the worst parts of my life and the best, but it was something that I could always turn to and always. Like people say, how could you pray if you're on a non-dual path? If you're awakened, especially, why would you pray? None of that mattered to me when I was in deep, deep pain, learning what authenticity was. I just needed help. So please know that my heart goes out to you. If that helps you at all, I am right there with you as the tears that you shed and as the feelings that you feel. That's me right there. And you're never alone. Please do consider reaching out to friends as well, asking for help with that. I'm sure there are many beings, physical beings, that also want to help. I'm not sure as well which country you live in, but I'm sure there will also be some support groups. Maybe it's something you've already done to actually help with the day-to-day experience of continuing to live in this situation. Most of all, please know that I love you. Always. Thanks, Anish.
Dear Helen, thank you for your teachings. You're a light on my path. My question is in relation to dogs. I love them and it hurts me in an exaggerated way when I see one of them lost or hurt. And it happens to me that when I go back to the streets where I saw one of them in danger, I start to feel very afraid. My heart flutters, and it takes me a long time to calm down again. I have to say that big dogs make me afraid. In fact, when I was pregnant with my daughter, without warning, a German Shepherd dog stood on two legs behind me. It was a very big scare, and fortunately, it didn't bite me. I have had three small breed dogs, and at the moment, I have one that is very old. Is there a karmic pattern here? The dogs, are they bringing me any messages? I would be very grateful for any comments.
Once again, I find myself remembering my own experiences here. This belief that I'm not safe or I'm in danger, that comes along with feeling like a separate being. And of course, we're seeing here on the path, we're seeing more and more that that's not true, that we are showing up as a human being and a dog. But some areas of our life, there's still a sense of separation that plays deeply. And I had transcended this idea in many areas of my life, but there was one area that I didn't know it was still functioning in, this idea that I'm not safe, until my sister had a beautiful rescue dog. He's since left his body, but he was a German Shepherd and mixed with a Belgian Shepherd and a Malamute. So he was a very big dog, and he looked very fierce. He also had a lot of issues, insecurities of his own, a lot of challenges being around people after we don't know what happened to him before she got him, but he had a deep mistrust of people, let's just say. And when he would bark, there would be this rising of fear, and he could sense when I was scared, and it would agitate him as well, and he would start barking more, and the whole thing would get worse. Over time, though, he taught me that he is one with me because if I would sit and self-inquire as I was sat in the room with my sister, where do I end and this beautiful dog begin? And at time and time again, I would find no difference between myself and the dog. And most times when I started to do this, I couldn't do it when I was sat right there with him because there was too much fear. And if someone would knock on the door, he'd start barking, be very, very loud. And immediately my nervous system was just so very agitated. So it started with some non-judgment of myself. Okay, I'm still coming from separation here. It's okay. And this beautiful being is going to help me transcend that. And over time, what I discovered is that he was the gentlest, kindest, most loving animal I have ever met. And that he taught us non-judgment and acceptance of his challenges too. And he showed up authentically with his karmic baggage as well, just like I did. And neither of us were able to hide it from each other, which was wonderful because it had to be healed. So if you find that challenging to do in the moment, you can do it in your front room with a cup of tea or coffee or whatever, and just imagine the dog sat there in the room with you, and try to find where you stop. You can only have fear of something if you feel separate to it. Of course, the body is going to protect and help you survive should you be attacked by a wild animal. But that's very, very unlikely if the fear has gone. And it's also possible for the body to take protective actions without being paralyzed by fear. Fear, if anything, should be a cause to action, to take some action. But the body can do that even without fear. It will know exactly what to do. If a car pulls out in front of me, my foot goes on the brake straight away. There doesn't need to be fear to make that happen. It's an automatic, instinctual response, isn't it, for us? So it really suggests some loving non-judgment of yourself here and some deep inquiry. And you can also ask, I've pointed to one form of inquiry that'll help, trying to find where you and the dog meet, and you'll find that there really isn't a boundary at all. You can also ask, what is this animal? What is this dog? And just be curious, open to every single answer. It's fear. It's dangerous. It's something to be avoided. It's the sunset. It's a car passing by. It's the feeling of my body. It's the sound of these words. Like literally every answer. Until you don't even know what the dog is anymore. We've stamped it with labels, right? It's dangerous. It's something, it's evidence of my failure to transcend something or whatever we've got going on inside. So, being right there where you are and have come through it. And I also think that eventually, maybe, um, I had this idea that I would come to really, really want and love a very big dog. Maybe that's never going to happen for you or me. I can enjoy their company. I'm a cat person anyway. Um, but just to be able to really meet this beautiful furry teacher of mine and embrace the message that it's trying to give. That if I don't feel safe, he must feel unsafe too, because there's only one of us. And as I do my own self-inquiry to help my own nervous system calm down, also helping him too. And over time, things changed completely. Um, yeah, so I hope that is of some help. Thanks, Anish.
Hi, Helen. Do you agree with the statement that there is no self? Most of what you share seems aligned with Advaita, so I presume you do. Personally, I've struggled with that premise. Accounts from near death experiences, rebirth memories, and many verified cases of children recalling past lives all point to continuity of a specific consciousness configuration. When everything else is stripped away, that streamlined configuration that goes on after death and moves from one life to the next appears to be what I would call a self. I still see it as everything ultimately returning to the source, But while we are here, some individuated continuity seems to be operating. That's why the blanket assertion of no self feels off to me. Another issue I see with Advaita is that its conclusion of no doer, no self, ends up leading us to the conclusion that the world itself should be dismissed. Yet, from my own observations, it seems that how we engage with life, our choices, actions, internal orientation, directly shape our experience in a way that rarely, if ever, expresses as random. Advaita doesn't seem to deal with that causal side of things. It treats the world as a dream without structure. But I see clear patterns that suggest that the world responds to us in consistent ways. Because of that, I don't see the world as something to reject, but as something to engage with. Also, I don't believe that Advaita acknowledges anything like a soul trap in the way physical reality operates with. I personally dealt with entity attachments who lush harvested me, so it seems like ignoring that leaves a pretty big blind spot. Particularly when it is evident to me that the same way to exit the trap is the very same way to manifest abundance, align and act from complete wholeness, as is the Creator's nature. It doesn't seem like a coincidence that those two things perfectly align, but Advaita rejects it. What do you think?
Well, I don't want to really comment so much on Advaita in that term. I have followed and studied it many different ways, but I can only really comment on anything from my own experience. Otherwise, it's not coming from truth. It's coming from something I've read about something, and I always want to answer from as authentic place inside as I can. This term, no self, to me was always deeply problematic. At first, it was a mental assertion that there is no self, and it was this sense of separate self that was asserting that it didn't exist. It was denying its own seeming existence. So I got into a whole sticky mess. I don't exist. This isn't my problem to deal with. I can't actually do anything about it anyway. And I'd heard this no self in many other teachings, Buddhism for one. Finally, I added a word into that, no separate self, no separate self. I could not ever find a separate, distinct entity that is using this body. And I found the formlessness, the formless, infinite nothingness, in which it is appearing as all of these things, this body included, and these words and everything. So there is most definitely an I, but it's not a separate person. This self is something much bigger, as I'm sure you have read about, or maybe hopefully you've experienced the formless self that you really are. And just as that formless self likes to show up as all these different forms and shapes and thoughts and mountains and hills and trees and planets and galaxies, specks of dust and subatomic particles, one of the ways it will show up is as a soul or astral form, subtle form, or jiva. I'm using all those four terms synonymously. And I'm going to just say the word soul from now on, but you could use any of those four just for brevity's sake. So the first arising seemingly out of this formlessness is this soul. And it is a subtle, energetic form. And it is that which is growing and evolving and changing and enlightening its frequency. The reason we're having this incarnation, physical body, is an extension of that soul. So it's an energetic shape, and it draws to itself or begins to show up also as a physical form. through which it can begin to experience its beliefs, its unconscious desires, the soul, to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel worthy, whatever it wants, to feel unlimited. All those have been latent in the soul, and they draw to us another physical lifetime so that the soul can transcend those. And that's what it's doing. And its final realization that it's not separate to anything, and that the source of it, the soul, the one that has the out of body experiences and near death experiences, all of that is this subtle shape, subtle form that we could call the soul, astral form, whatever. As we hear, Jiva, the Jiva is Shiva, the Jiva is, the soul is the formless consciousness. But it's never separate to anything. It's a vibration, and a vibration can't just stop. It's kind of ongoing. But there is a unique part of the totality of vibration that is Helen, and then another unique part that is you. And the way that I envisage it, that helped me really understand, is if the consciousness was a big, big shining jewel, one whole continuous jewel or precious stone, like a diamond, for example. And on that diamond, if we look closer, there are many, many individual faces or facets. Each one of those we could say is like a soul. And each facet is completely different to any other facet. If you look at any face on this diamond, it's different to all the others completely. Totally unique. And yet never separate from the facet next to it, to the left of it, underneath, and to the right. The one behind it, in front, all of that. If you think of it as a kind of three-dimensional, yeah, that's where the kind of the metaphor breaks down. But on the surface of this jewel, this diamond, there's an infinite number of facets. Do any of them really exist? No. There's only formless consciousness showing up as souls. Do any of them really exist? Yes. Because they are made of infinite consciousness, so they're just as real as consciousness. Which one of those answers is correct? Both. May need to sit with that a little bit. And the same for the world as you've pointed to here. The same for the world. When I look out there, I see only the same as in here. I don't see a world outside. The world that we should give up or renounce is the world between our ears, the world of thoughts about what's out here. When we actually do that, we'll see there's nothing wrong with the world. Actually, it is our own self. And it begins to take on the quality of a very different experience as being benign and something to be loved, deeply, deeply loved and not rejected. How could you reject anything, any way that you're showing up? The mind doesn't know the difference between what we think the world is and what it actually is. So it tries to reject the world. But from the place of the infinite consciousness, there is only infinite consciousness. The world, consciousness, same, same. One seems to be with form, one seems to be without form. But just like two sides of a coin, it's the same thing. Cannot exist, neither can exist without the other. The consciousness can appear as form, but never really is. The consciousness can appear as a world, but never really is. From there, we must come to love the world from as rich a fuller understanding as we love the consciousness, because they're non-different. As to the non-doing, if there, and I'm going to keep this short because this answer is becoming very long. There's a couple of points to really investigate. There is a kind of causal thing, as you've pointed to. So to just say there's no doer, no separate doer, that's true because there is no person, right? No separate self, as we started this with. So there could be no doer of actions, no thinker of thoughts, no doer of actions, no decider of decisions. But what we find is as the soul begins to recognize its source, begins to turn behind it, so to speak, and go, whoa, there's something much bigger than what I thought I was, then the light of the consciousness becomes infused into the soul, and the vibration shifts. It enlightens itself with these heavier beliefs, namely that it is a separate entity. That one begins to disappear completely. That belief, I mean. As that happens, the frequency of the soul is constantly upgrading, and it's upgrading faster and faster and faster and faster. First, very slow, many, many lifetimes, imagine lifetimes to get to this point, and then all of a sudden, and that's this lifetime for you, for all of us. As the frequency of the soul gets higher and higher, so too the thoughts, epiphanies, inspirations, and actions, words, decisions that arise spontaneously are going to have to match this frequency. So while we think we're a separate being, unworthy and unlovable, our thoughts, words, and actions and experiences have to agree with that. There's no other way. When we begin to realize we're something so much more amazing than we ever thought, the real consciousness, formless presence, the soul can express itself in a much higher way. And in fact, selfish and self-centered actions and thoughts and words become out of reach then. It looks like compassion, it looks like universal love, all of that. So it's really the frequency of the soul that is dictating what happens. Intention arises in the soul. I'd like to be more loving. There's no entity to do it. But just that very intention must manifest because there's no separate entity to get in the way. So I hope there's a lot in this here. I hope there's something in that that can begin to unravel first. There's no separate self. There's very definitely a self, though. We can't negate the fact that we're listening to this, we're experiencing it through a body, right? We can't negate that. But when we look at what that is, there's no separate entity to be found. What we do find is that which is the ground of all forms, formless, appearing as all of these apparent souls. The one infinite formless consciousness is experiencing itself right now as an infinite number of apparent souls, tasting life in all the various ways it does through that. So I hope that that helps. We better make this the last question, Anish. Thank you.
I want to understand what exactly is separation. It is every thought, every emotion, feeling that leads me to see what it really is. My mind wants to be sure.
So could you just read that one more time for me?
I want to understand what exactly is separation. It is every thought, every emotion, feeling that leads me to see what it really is. My mind wants to be sure.
So the one that's aware of the thoughts and the feelings and the words, the one that knows, as you're speaking, you know what's coming out of your mouth. You know, you recognize the sound of the words, right? And this you that knows, is it a distinct entity? Can you prove there's a distinct entity sitting inside the body that at the time of death is going to either disappear or be liberated from the body, but still be a unique, separate entity? Can you find the edges or boundaries of where you stop? I'm not talking about the body. The body has a shape, it's a tangible, visible form. We can see where it stops. But you that's knowing and operating the body, where do you stop? If you can't find, when you really look, anything tangible about the one that knows the thoughts, is aware of the thoughts and emotions and actions, then we can come to see, as we get used to our own recognition of our own formless nature, totally intangible, that intangibility cannot stop. The intangible space between my hands seems to stop when it reaches my hand, but it really doesn't. It can never be divided into separate beings. It's not like my formlessness here, if we were sat next to each other in a room, and your formlessness there. You cannot put an edge on something that is formless. You can't put it in a box. The box is inside the formlessness, in fact. The formlessness is appearing as the box. The separation in this context simply means that you are a distinct, completely distinct entity from any other entity, any other being. So I really suggest trying to find that out. And again, there's lots of self-inquiry videos here on the channel that can help with that. And it's good that your mind wants to know, right? It wants to know beyond any doubt. I remember this feeling when it arose inside me. I have to know. I have to somehow. I didn't know how I was going to make it happen, but I have to know beyond all doubt that I'm not separate to anything. And I followed that like a trail of breadcrumbs. I started off as a mild curiosity and led to a burning obsession that must fulfill itself. Sounds like it's happening for you also. So I hope that helps. So I just want to say thank you, Anisha, as always, for reading the questions so beautifully. And thank you for sending your questions in. We'll be back next month with another volume. And as I've said, the links in the description below are there if you want to either submit a question to be answered in this. Please be aware there is a bit of a queue, so it might take a while, a couple of months to get to it. If you would like more immediate help, you are more than welcome to join our community. You can go to helenhamilton.org and just check out the homepage there. There'll also be a link in this underneath this video as well. And we have a very vibrant WhatsApp community. It's like an online ashram. And each day I take some time to answer questions from members of our community, our family. It really is just a very loving family where we support each other and help each other through the challenging times and the good times along the path. So thank you so much for sharing your questions so openly. I will see you back here for the next volume in a month, about a month or so. Namaste.